Section 4 of To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9. Yes, Mr. Banks said, watching him go. It was 1,000 pities. Lily had said something about his frightening her. He changed from one mood to another so suddenly. Yes, said Mr. Banks, it was 1,000 pities that Ramsay could not behave a little more like other people. For he liked Lily Briscoe. He could discuss Ramsay with her quite openly. It was for that reason, he said, that the young don't read Carlyle. A crusty old grumbler who lost his temper if the porridge was cold, why should he preach to us, was what Mr. Banks understood that young people said nowadays. It was 1,000 pities if you thought, as he did, that Carlyle was one of the great teachers of mankind. Lily was ashamed to say that she had not read Carlyle since she was at school. But in her opinion, one liked Mr. Ramsay all the better for thinking that if his little finger ached, the whole world must come to an end. It was not that she minded, for who could be deceived by him? He asked you quite openly to flatter him, to admire him. His little dodges deceived nobody. What she disliked was his narrowness, his blindness, she said, looking after him. A bit of a hypocrite, Mr. Banks suggested, looking too at Mr. Ramsay's back, for was he not thinking of his friendship, and of Cam refusing to give him a flower, and of all those boys and girls, and his own house, full of comfort, but, since his wife's death, quiet rather. Of course he had his work. All the same, he rather wished Lily to agree that Ramsay was, as he said, a bit of a hypocrite. Lily Briscoe went on putting away her brushes, looking up, looking down. Looking up, there he was, Mr. Ramsay, advancing towards them, swinging, careless, oblivious, remote. A bit of a hypocrite, she repeated. Oh no, the most sincere of men, the truest. Here he was, the best. But looking down, she thought, he is absorbed in himself, he is tyrannical, he is unjust, and kept looking down, purposely, for only so could she keep steady, staying with the Ramsays. Directly one looked up and saw them, what she called being in love flooded them. They became part of that unreal but penetrating and exciting universe which is the world seen through the eyes of love. The sky stuck to them, the birds sang through them, and, what was even more exciting, she felt too, as she saw Mr. Ramsay bearing down and retreating, and Mrs. Ramsay sitting with James in the window, and the cloud moving and the tree bending, how life, from being made up of little separate incidents which one lived one by one, became curled and whole like a wave which bore one up and threw one down with it, there, with a dash on the beach. Mr. Banks expected her to answer, and she was about to say something criticising Mrs. Ramsay, how she was alarming too in her way, high-handed, or words to that effect, when Mr. Banks made it entirely unnecessary for her to speak by his rapture. For such it was, considering his age, turned 60, and his cleanliness and his impersonality, and the white scientific coat which seemed to clothe him. For him to gaze as Lily saw him gazing at Mrs. Ramsay was a rapture, equivalent, Lily felt, to the loves of dozens of young men, and perhaps Mrs. Ramsay had never excited the loves of dozens of young men. It was love, she thought, pretending to move her canvas, distilled and filtered, love that never attempted to clutch its object, but, like the love which mathematicians bear their symbols, or poets their phrases, was meant to be spread over the world, and become part of the human gain. So it was indeed. The world by all means should have shared it, could Mr. Banks have said why that woman pleased him so, why the sight of her reading a fairy tale to her boy had upon him precisely the same effect as the solution of a scientific problem, so that he rested in contemplation of it, and felt, as he felt when he had proved something absolute about the digestive system of plants, that barbarity was tamed, the reign of chaos subdued. Such a rapture, for by what other name could one call it, made Lily Briscoe forget entirely what she had been about to say. It was nothing of importance, something about Mrs. Ramsay. It paled beside this rapture, this silent stare, for which she felt intense gratitude, for nothing so solaced her, eased her of the perplexity of life, and miraculously raised its burdens, as this sublime power, this heavenly gift, and one would no more disturb it, while it lasted, than break up the shaft of sunlight lying level across the floor. That people should love like this, that Mr. Banks should feel this for Mrs. Ramsay, she glanced at him, musing, was helpful, was exalting. She wiped one brush after another upon a piece of old rag, menially, on purpose. She took shelter from the reverence which covered all women. She felt herself praised. Let him gaze, she would steal a look at her picture. She could have wept. It was bad, it was bad, it was infinitely bad. She could have done it differently, of course. The colour could have been thinned and faded, the shapes etherealized. That was how Pansfort would have seen it. But then she did not see it like that. She saw the colour burning on a framework of steel, the light of a butterfly's wing lying upon the arches of a cathedral. Of all that, only a few random marks scrawled upon the canvas remained. And it would never be seen, never be hung even, and there was Mr. Tansley whispering in her ear, "Women can't paint, women can't write." She now remembered what she had been going to say about Mrs. Ramsay. She did not know how she would have put it, but it would have been something critical. She had been annoyed the other night by some high-handedness. Looking along the level of Mr. Banks's glance at her, she thought that no woman could worship another woman in the way he worshipped. They could only seek shelter under the shade which Mr. Banks extended over them both. Looking along his beam, she added to it her different ray, thinking that she was unquestionably the loveliest of people, bowed over her book, the best, perhaps, but also different, too, from the perfect shape which one saw there. But why different, and how different, she asked herself, scraping her palette of all those mounds of blue and green, which seemed to her like clods with no life in them now, yet she vowed she would inspire them, force them to move, flow, do her bidding tomorrow. How did she differ? What was the spirit in her, the essential thing, by which, had you found a crumpled glove in the corner of a sofa, you would have known it from its twisted finger, hers indisputably? She was like a bird for speed, an arrow for directness. She was willful, she was commanding. Of course, Lily reminded herself, I am thinking of her relations with women, and I am much younger, an insignificant person, living off the Brompton Road. She opened bedroom windows, she shut doors. So she tried to start the tune of Mrs. Ramsay in her head. Arriving late at night, with a light tap on one's bedroom door, wrapped in an old fur coat, for the setting of her beauty was always that, hasty but apt. She would enact again whatever it might be, Charles Tansley losing his umbrella, Mr. Carmichael snuffling and sniffing, Mr. Banks saying, "The vegetable salts are lost." All this she would adroitly shape, even maliciously twist, and, moving over to the window, in pretence that she must go, it was dawn, she could see the sun rising, half turn back, more intimately, but still always laughing, insist that she must, Minta must, they all must marry, since in the whole world whatever laurels might be tossed to her, but Mrs. Ramsay cared not a fig for her painting, or triumphs won by her. Probably Mrs. Ramsay had had her share of those. And here she saddened, darkened, and came back to her chair. There could be no disputing this. An unmarried woman. She lightly took her hand for a moment. An unmarried woman has missed the best of life. The house seemed full of children sleeping and Mrs. Ramsay listening, shaded lights and regular breathing. Oh, but, Lily would say, there was her father, her home, even, had she dared to say it, her painting. But all this seemed so little, so virginal against the other. Yet, as the night wore on, and white lights parted the curtains, and even now and then some bird chirped in the garden, gathering a desperate courage, she would urge her own exemption from the universal law, plead for it. She liked to be alone. She liked to be herself. She was not made for that. And so have to meet a serious stare from eyes of unparalleled depth, and confront Mrs. Ramsay's simple certainty, and she was childlike now, that her dear Lily, her little Brisk, was a fool. Then she remembered she had laid her head on Mrs. Ramsay's lap, and laughed and laughed and laughed almost hysterically at the thought of Mrs. Ramsay presiding with immutable calm over destinies which she completely failed to understand. There she sat, simple, serious. She had recovered her sense of her now. This was the glove's twisted finger. But into what sanctuary had one penetrated? Lily Briscoe had looked up at last, and there was Mrs. Ramsay, unwitting entirely what had caused her laughter, still presiding, but now with every trace of wilfulness abolished, and, in its stead, something clear as the space which the clouds at last uncover, the little space of sky which sleeps beside the moon. Was it wisdom? Was it knowledge? Was it, once more, the deceptiveness of beauty, so that all one's perceptions, halfway to truth, were tangled in a golden mesh? Or did she lock up within her some secret which certainly Lily Briscoe believed people must have for the world to go on at all? Everyone could not be as helter-skelter, hand-to-mouth as she was. But if they knew, could they tell one what they knew? Sitting on the floor with her arms round Mrs. Ramsay's knees, close as she could get, smiling to think that Mrs. Ramsay would never know the reason of that pressure, she imagined how, in the chambers of the mind and heart of the woman who was, physically touching her, were stood, like the treasures in the tombs of kings, tablets bearing sacred inscriptions, which, if one could spell them out, would teach one everything, but they would never be offered openly, never made public. What art was there, known to love or cunning, by which one pressed through into those secret chambers? What device for becoming, like waters poured into one jar, inextricably the same, one with the object one adored? Could the body achieve, or the mind, subtly mingling in the intricate passages of the brain, or the heart? Could loving, as people called it, make her and Mrs. Ramsay one? For it was not knowledge, but unity that she desired, not inscriptions on tablets, nothing that could be written in any language known to men, but intimacy itself, which is knowledge, she had thought, leaning her head on Mrs. Ramsay's knee. Nothing happened, nothing, as she leant her head against Mrs. Ramsay's knee. And yet she knew knowledge and wisdom were stored up in Mrs. Ramsay's heart. How then, she had asked herself, did one know one thing or another thing about people, sealed as they were? Only like a bee, drawn by some sweetness or sharpness in the air, intangible to touch or taste, one haunted the dome-shaped hive, ranged the wastes of the air over the countries of the world alone, and then haunted the hives with their murmurs and their stirrings, the hives which were people. Mrs. Ramsay rose, Lily rose, Mrs. Ramsay went. For days there hung about her, as after a dream some subtle change is felt in the person one has dreamt of, more vividly than anything she said, the sound of murmuring, and, as she sat in the wicker armchair in the drawing-room window, she wore, to Lily's eyes, an august shape, the shape of a dome. This ray passed level with Mr. Banks's ray straight to Mrs. Ramsay, sitting reading there with James at her knee. But now, while she still looked, Mr. Banks had done. He had put on his spectacles, He had stepped back. He had raised his hand. He had slightly narrowed his clear blue eyes, when Lily, rousing herself, saw what he was at, and winced like a dog who sees a hand raised to strike it. She would have snatched her picture off the easel, but she said to herself, "One must." She braced herself to stand the awful trial of someone looking at her picture. "One must," she said, "one must." And, if it must be seen, Mr. Banks was less alarming than another. But that any other eyes should see the residue of her 33 years, the deposit of each day's living mixed with something more secret than she had ever spoken or shown in the course of all those days, was an agony. At the same time, it was immensely exciting. Nothing could be cooler and quieter. Taking out a penknife, Mr. Banks tapped the canvas with the bone handle. What did she wish to indicate by the triangular purple shape, just there? He asked. It was Mrs. Ramsay reading to James, she said. She knew his objection, that no one could tell it for a human shape. But she had made no attempt at likeness, she said. For what reason had she introduced them then? He asked. Why, indeed, except that, if there, in that corner, it was bright, here, in this, she felt the need of darkness. Simple, obvious, commonplace as it was, Mr. Banks was interested. Mother and child, then, objects of universal veneration, and in this case the mother was famous for her beauty, might be reduced, he pondered, to a purple shadow without irreverence. But the picture was not of them, she said, or not in his sense. There were other senses too in which one might reverence them, by a shadow here and a light there, for instance. Her tribute took that form, if, as she vaguely supposed, a picture must be a tribute. A mother and child might be reduced to a shadow without irreverence. A light here required a shadow there. He considered. He was interested. He took it scientifically in complete good faith. The truth was that all his prejudices were on the other side, he explained. The largest picture in his dining room, which painters had praised and valued at a higher price than he had given for it, was of the cherry trees in blossom on the banks of the Kennet. He had spent his honeymoon on the banks of the Kennet, he said. Lily must come and see that picture, he said. But now, he turned, with his glasses raised, to the scientific examination of her canvas. The question being one of the relations of masses, of lights and shadows, which, to be honest, he had never considered before. He would like to have it explained. What, then, did she wish to make of it? And he indicated the scene before them. She looked. She could not show him what she wished to make of it, could not see it even herself, without a brush in her hand. She took up once more her old painting position, with the dim eyes and the absent-minded manner, subduing all her impressions as a woman to something much more general, becoming once more under the power of that vision which she had seen clearly once, and must now grope for among hedges and houses and mothers and children, her picture. It was a question, she remembered, how to connect this mass on the right hand with that on the left. She might do it by bringing the line of the branch across so, or break the vacancy in the foreground by an object, James perhaps, so. But the danger was that by doing that the unity of the whole might be broken. She stopped. She did not want to bore him. She took the canvas lightly off the easel. But it had been seen. It had been taken from her. This man had shared with her something profoundly intimate. And, thanking Mr. Ramsay for it, and Mrs. Ramsay for it, and the hour and the place, crediting the world with a power which she had not suspected, that one could walk away down that long gallery, not alone any more, but arm in arm with somebody, the strangest feeling in the world, and the most exhilarating. She nicked the catch of her paint-box too, more firmly than was necessary, and the nick seemed to surround in a circle for ever the paint-box, the lawn, Mr. Banks, and that wild villain, Cam, dashing past.